Welcome to a new series of learning a Maamar from the Rebbe as a Hachana for Gimel Tammuz. So the Maamar that I've chosen is a Maamar that was said Shabbos Parshas Gorari'he Gimel Tammuz, Tofshin Chai, and it was given out in Tofshin Memtes as a Kuntris Muga from the Rebbe. It's printed in Sefer Amorim Meluket and so on. If you've got the Sefer Amorim Meluket in volumes, and it's Chela Gimel. Otherwise, it's according to the months and the Parshias and so on. I've chosen this Maamar also because obviously it's got to do with Gimel Tammuz, and it was put out for Gimel Tammuz, the Haschola, the beginning of the Geula of the Friedike Rebbe. But also there's a theme that runs through this Maamar, as we'll see as we go through it slowly and properly, that is a theme that comes up in the Rebbe's Torah and in the Rebbe's Hashkafa a lot. So we won't do a whole ois every day because it's only 9 oisius. We'll go for a few weeks until Gimel Tammuz in Mirz Hashem, or close to Gimel Tammuz, and we'll just do a piece every day, hopefully a little bit thoroughly. So today we'll just do the first ois. It starts off with the pasuk Hasom Nafshenu b'chaim le'nosan lamoit ragleinu. It's a pasuk in Tilim. David HaMelech says, he's talking about Hashem, that Hashem has placed, he has set our soul, our neshama, in life, b'chaim, and he doesn't allow our foot to falter, to fail, in other words, to fall. So the Rebbe brings that the Friedike Rebbe explained in his Maamar of Chag HaGeula Yud Beis Tammuz, Tofresh Tzadik Daled, which the beginning of the Geula, as we know, was Gimel Tammuz, that when he talks about Hasom Nafshenu b'chaim, this is a type of life that is higher than the Chaya HaNefesh, than the Chayas of the Neshama on its own. Because the Chaya HaNefesh, the life of the Neshama, is limited. Now, when we say it's limited, we know that the different levels of Chayas of the Neshama. There's what we call Chayas Prati. There's the specific life force that comes into every organ or limb or koyach. Then there's the Chayas Kloli, there's the general life force that keeps the body alive. And then there's a level where we talk about the Neshama being Chay Be'etzem. It is essential life. It's not only that it gives life, the life that is expressed from the neshama, but it's Chay Be'etzem. It is essentially the concept of Chayas, as it's called in Chassidus, Chay Be'etzem, which Chay Be'etzem obviously is higher than the hispashtus, than the manifestation of the Chayas, which comes into the body to give it Chayas. In other words, not just the Chayas that comes into the body, but it in itself, its essence is Chayas, Chay Be'etzem. Nevertheless, the fact that the nefesh is Chay Be'etzem is because Hashem instilled that nature in the neshama, that it should be Chay Be'etzem, and therefore this Chayis that is in the level, even the level of Chay Be'etzem, is limited. Therefore, when the pasuk says, it refers to a Chayis that Hashem is going to be Som Nafshenu, is going to place our neshama, our nefesh, in that life, that's higher than Teva. In other words, everything about the neshama's chayis, even chay be'etzem, is al pi teva. This is something which is higher than teva. And therefore, what does it mean? Hasom nafshenu b'chaim le'nosan lamoit ragleinu. That the koyach, David HaMelech is saying that the koyach that we have, that ragleinu, that our feet will not falter, is dafke comes from the chayim which is higher than teva. Obviously, now the Maamar is going to go into a whole tangent, and at the end, they'll explain what this actually means. Have a good day. Hasom Nafshenu b'chaim, part 2. So yesterday we learned the pasuk Hasom Nafshenu b'chaim. Hashem places our life, our neshama, in life, and which explained that the life over here is higher than the life of the neshama, even at the level of Chay Be'etzem, and that results in the fact that they nosan lamoit ragleinu, that our feet will not falter. So the Rebbe continues there to understand this, that why, if it was just left up to the Chaya HaNefesh itself, the life of the neshama itself, there would be lamoit ragleinu, there would be the faltering of the feet, and the only koyach why it isn't is because we have the chayim which comes from higher than teva. That's to understand that, number one. Number two, to understand what all this has to do with the Geula of Yud Beis Tammuz, because this Maamar was said on Gimel Tammuz, which is the beginning of the Geula of the Friedike Rebbe. So to understand all of this, we need to understand what it says at the beginning of the Parsha. Which Parsha? The Parsha is Gori'ahe. So here the Rebbe sets the scene to what is going to be explained in the bulk of the Maamar. So Parshas Gori'ahe begins with the words Vayikach Gori'ahe, and the Targum Onkelos says that Vayikach Gori'ahe means V'ispalig Gori'ahe. Now, normally when it says Vayikach, the Targum says V'nosiv, and he took. But over here, it's for ispalag. Ispalag means he divided, he split. And the Rebbe brings the Noyam Elimelech. That Noyam Elimelech says, from Elimelech Mezhensk, that Vayikach Koirach, or the Ispali Koirach, as a Targum puts it, is similar to the concept of Hamavdil Bein Rakia, Hamavdil Bein Mayim L'Mayim. When Hashem created the world, He created the Rakia, the heaven, that was separating between the upper waters and the lower waters. And this is connected to what the Tzemach Tzedek says. The Tzemach Tzedek says that this idea that Ispali Koirach is similar to the heaven that separates between the waters connects to what it says in the Zohar. The Zohar says that Rakia Hamavdil, in the beginning of Bria So'elam, the heaven that split between the upper waters and the lower waters, represents the idea of the machlokes between the left and the right, which we'll see later, is chesed and gvura and so on. And the Zohar says, Kegavno do, similarly, is the machlokes of Koirach and Aaron, which means as follows. And this is what the Rebbe makes a very strong point here, that the connection when we say Ispali Koirach is like the Rakia Hamavdil, that the machlokes of Koirach is like the heaven that divided. So that could be understood on a simple level. It could be understood that Koirach led a machlokes, and we know the origin of the machlokes is the second day of creation, when the heaven separated between the two things. Like it says in the Medrash. Why doesn't it say Ki Toiv on Monday? Because machlokes was created on Monday. And therefore, the Koirach's machlokes is connected to that. But it's much more than that. It's actually, according to what the Zohar says, it's more than that. It's the specific connection. That this machlokes of Koirach and Aaron is not just originates in the idea of machlokes, which was created on Monday, but it's like the very machlokes of splitting between the high waters and the low waters, which means that just like the machlokes of the Rakia is the machlokes between the left and the right, similarly, the machlokes of Koirach against Aaron is Gvura against Chesed. That Aaron is Chesed, Yemin, the right. Koirach, who was a Levi, comes from Gvura, which is the left. And that is the machlokes. The machlokes is between the Smoil, the Gvura, against the Chesed. And of course, continuing on the mind, the Rebbe is going to explain exactly what that means and develop a whole idea around this concept of what Koirach actually meant to highlight the idea of Gvura against Chesed, and so on. Have a wonderful day. Hasom Nafshenu the Maamer part 3. We're going to end off Ois Beis and then do Ois Gimel. The Rebbe continues on explaining the idea of Koirach being connected to machlokes and Gevura and so on, and he says that these two concepts, that Koirach, we say Ispali Koirach, Koirach made a machlokes, and the fact also that he argued with Aaron HaKohen specifically, are connected, because that machlokes was created on Monday is because Sunday is Chesed, Monday is Gevura, and Gevura gives room for machlokes, as the Zohar explains. Therefore, one can arrive at the following conclusion, that it's not just that Koirach had a machlokes, but that the Iker Inyan of Koirach is machlokes. And this is understood also what Chazal said, that anyone who's maintains a machlokes transgresses a lois hasei in the Torah, as it says in the pasuk, "V'lo yirka Koirach v'chadosei." And that's what and there's the fact that he argued with Chesed, with Aaron, because Aaron is Chesed, Kohen is Chesed, and he wanted to make Gvura. The main thing is because there should be a chizuk to the concept of machlokes. So we have to understand, we know that Koirach Pikachoy was actually a smart person, and therefore one needs to conclude that he had a machlokes with Aaron is because actually he was mistaken. He really wanted something that he perceived to be a derech in avodah, just mistakenly. So why would he want machlokes? In other words, if it's just about arguing with Aaron, we can understand that he believed that the main thing in avodah is gevura, where Aaron is chesed. But this, if we talk about Koirach, not just arguing with Aaron, but Koirach wanting the actual concept of machlokes, to have a chizuk of machlokes, why would he think that machlokes is a derech in avodah Hashem? Also, we have to understand, going back to this idea that we started off with, that Vayikach Koirach the Noam Elimelech, that it's like the Rakia, the heaven that's separated between the two waters. The truth is, why do we actually need that? Because the Tzemach Tzedek writes, Vayikach Koirach itself comes from like a bald spot. In other words, it's like the idea of or ice, so like a heaven, that Koirach is the concept of Rakia. So why do we need this extra business of the Ispali Koirach, the Koirach made a machlokes? So Rebbe starts explaining the following. We have to go back to this idea of the Rakia, the heaven that was mavdil, that separated between the two waters. Water represents tainu, pleasure. So therefore, as it says in Tanya, because water feeds all pleasure, etc. The rakia hamavdil between the upper waters and the lower waters is the division between pleasure in inyonim ruchnim, which is mayim elyonim, and pleasure in inyonim gashmim, olam hazeh, which is mayim tachtonim. What's the concept of the rakia hamavdil? We had this idea at the beginning of creation, which Korach sort of went against, but we'll see what the idea, the intent was. That this rakia, this heaven that separates between the two waters, the purpose is that the mayim tachtonim should be elevated higher to the way they were before. Why? Because when the lower waters were sent downwards and the upper waters sent upwards, and this was the division of the rakia, so the lower waters became lower. They had a tshuka, they had suddenly a thirst and a desire to be elevated. As the Zohar tells us, mayim tachtonim boichin, lower waters cry, we want to be before the king. Anan be'inam meheva kadam malka. Through this tshuka, through this desire, they become elevated more than they were before. In fact, ultimately they become elevated and high even more than the mayim elyonim. And this is why on Tuesday we find that even on Monday there's no kitov, but on Tuesday there was kitov twice. Why? L'chayra, the one kitov was for Monday's work, but that's in machlokas. So why is it good? And the birur is because through the avoid of the person, it makes a birur and the aliyah of mayim tachtonim. And therefore on Tuesday when the yabosha, the dry land, was exposed, which is the concept of avodah, the person doing avodah. So therefore the idea of the meleches hamayim, what happened to the water on Monday, is completed. That they are elevated more than they were there before, and therefore this whole idea of the water and the water coming downwards becomes also kitov. The machlokas, the division, becomes kitov because it affects, it results in the mayim tachtonim, in the lower waters, wanting to become even higher and becoming elevated and refined to a higher madrega than they were before, and even to a higher madrega than the mayim elyonim. And therefore, this is the concept we always talk about, the idea of Yeridat Tzarech Aliyah, and that the waters, because they are now exposed in the Yerida, they can now be refined, and through this shukr, through this desire, they can become elevated even greater than they were before. That's the original intent. But we'll understand Korach had a bit of a different perspective on how this should work, and this is his machlokes, which we'll do in Mitzvah tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Hasom Nafshenu, part 4. So yesterday we talked about the idea of the purpose of the separation between the upper waters and lower waters is that the mayim tachtonim should have the tshuka, should have the desire to want to be elevated and go higher, and then will become even higher than the mayim elyonim. And that's the way the Eibishter created the world. That was the tachlis. However, Korach wanted machlokas because he made a mistake. This idea that mayim tachtonim, he perceived that this idea that the lower waters were separated and became lower. The kavanah wasn't that they should want to go higher. The kavanah is that their milah should be revealed. In other words, like this: there's a milah in gashmias over ruchnis. The shoyrish of gashmias is actually higher than the shoyrish of ruchnis. It doesn't explain this maamar, but the power to create gashmias comes from the essence of the Eibishter, like says in Tanya, that only someone who's mitzvusei matzmusei could create something that feels mitzvusei matzmusei, and so on and so forth. The bottom line is that the shoyrish of gashmis is actually higher than the shoyrish of ruchnis. So the shoyrish of the mayim tachtonim, which is the union of gevura, concealment, tzimtzum, is actually higher. So therefore, he wanted the gevura to be the main thing. This, though, we say that the tachtonim cry. They want to be close to the king. That's because they feel the mile of gilui. They feel the mile of chesed. They don't want to be where they are. Mayim tachtonim does not want to be where it is. Because since giluyim, revelation, is in the olam eselyonim, that's why the lower waters cry. They want to go out of the mitzias and become higher. But according to the mistake of Korach, that the kavanah is in the tainu gashmi itself, that it should be revealed in it, the shoyrish of gashmis. So he said that ikr mile is in tzimtzum and gvura. Now this was actually a mistake, because the gilui of the shoyrish of mayim tachtonim itself, in other words, the fact that the gashmis is actually higher ultimately than the ruchnis, will be revealed osid love when Mashiach comes. In order for the gilui of that shoyrish of mayim tachtonim to happen, first there has to be a process where the mayim tachtonim feels the maila of the giluim. and therefore it has a chukka, it has a thirst to go. And that's why when the Eibishter created the world on Monday, it does not say Kitov, because there was something lacking. They wanted to get to the place of Gilui. And therefore now the whole kavanah is that the Mayim Tachtoinim should go upwards, and that's the idea of Tuesday. Because the shorish of Tzimtzum itself will be revealed only la'asid love, and that was Korach's mistake. It was premature what he wanted. It's something that will happen when Mashiach comes. We'll be able to connect to the Eibishter straight through the Gashmis, because the shorish of Gashmis will be revealed. But for now, the Gashmis conceals, and we have to know that the only way to reveal the mile of Gashmis is for the Gashmis to have a tzimo and a thirst, a chukka, to want to go out of its metzias and be connected to the concept of Giluyim. Have a wonderful day. Hasom Nafshenu, part 5. So yesterday we explained that what Korach wanted to do is to actually keep the Maim Tachtoin, the lower waters, down, because he wanted to go straight to the Gashmius, because the Sheirish of Gashmius is higher than Ruchnius, and he didn't want that there should be a concept where the Gashmius needs to have the desire to go higher, but actually the greater Sheirish should be apparent in the Gashmis alone, which was a mistake, because until Mashiach comes, it can't happen that way. The only way it can happen is by the Gashmis having a desire to go higher to the Ruchnis. Only then the Shorish of the Gashmis can be revealed. So the Rebbe now explains the similar thing in the avodah of a person. That the highest avodah really is the avodah of B'chol D'rachecha D'eyu, that even higher than Torah mitzvahs. That means that when a person does, and he reveals Hashem, Yedias Elokus, even in worldly things, B'chol D'rachecha, because he sees the Gashi Shkacha Pratis and he sees amazing things, then he reveals Hashem in B'chol D'rachecha D'eyu. However, that can't be, you can't go straight to there. In other words, in order that when a person engages with the world, it shouldn't influence him and it shouldn't have a Yerida, it has to be rather the Avodah B'chol Masech L'Shem Shamayim. That initially his whole kavanah from engaging in the world is in order to do Torah mitzvahs. When he engaged in the world in order to do Torah mitzvahs, then when he's engaged with the world and he's oisik in Yonei Ha'olam, then he will see a Gula Elokus as well. But it's got to start with the desire only to do Torah mitzvahs, and that the engagement in the world is only a means to be engaged with Torah mitzvahs. In Oisvav, the Rebbe says, this is the pshat that the Chazal say, Ein machzikin b'machlekes, don't maintain the machlekes. Because the fact that there was a machlekes, that Mayim Tachtoinim was separate from Mayim Elyonim, that's something that was created by the Eibishter. But the chet, the avera of Korach, was that he wanted to maintain that division, he wanted to maintain that machlekes. Now, just like when the world was created, there was a machlekes, but the whole point of the machlekes was that there should be shalom, and that came through the Mayim Tachtoinim wanting to desire to be connected to the Mayim Elyonim. Same thing with Moshe Rabbeinu and Korach. Moshe Rabbeinu pursued a path to make peace with Korach, because Moshe Rabbeinu thought that just like on this third day, which is Tiferes, that took away the division between that happened on the Monday. Same thing will be with Korach, the Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the third born, etc. The idea is Tiferes. He'll be Mevarer the Machlekes, but it wasn't to be because Korach didn't want them. Korach wanted to maintain the Machlekes, which is also why the Targum says Vayikach Korach means that Korach made a division. And we say that from the Noivin Melech, it's like the Rakia Hamavdil, like the why? Because the fact, even though Korach's name itself means division, as we said before, but that's a division that is created by Hashem. But Vayikach Korach means that he wanted to maintain the machlokes. And I want to actually, there shouldn't be the birur of the machlokes, but it should be actually a maintained machlokes, because he wanted to go straight to the Mayim Tachtoinim, and he didn't want to be in his bar through Moshe Rabbeinu, and that was his avera. Have a good day. Hasom Nafshenu, part 6. We're going to end with this piece today, as then someone else is doing another mimer next week. So the Rebbe says like this: why did Korach make this mistake? That he thought that the division of the Mayim HaTachtoinim would be in itself an important thing, and it should not have the desire to connect higher, was because he was missing the idea of bittul. Because this concept of having the waters divide, but at the same time having this chukka, this desire to connect higher, comes from the combination of two opposite midas, which is tiferes. Because when it comes to chesed, which is the maila of gilui, then the maila is Mayim Elyonim, and then it shouldn't have gone, the Mayim Tachtonim should never have divided in the first place. But because of Gvura and the idea of the revealing the shorish of the Mayim Tachtonim, the shorish of Gashmish, which is higher, then that's the idea of Gourarie. Now, to combine both things, to have the water actually divide, but have still the desire to connect higher, this comes from Tiferes, which combines both things. You have the idea of Mayim Tachtonim, which ultimately is to reveal the Shoirish in the Gourarie itself, but it only happens through the Tshuka, the desire to connect higher. That's through Tiferes, which is combining Chesed and Gourarie, and that needs Bittul, and Korach didn't have Bittul, and therefore he didn't have this idea. Says the Rebbe the same things with regard to the Avodah B'chol Ma'aseh L'Shem Shemayim. That we know that even though a person knows the unbelievable mila of of knowing Elokus in worldly stuff itself, nevertheless, he doesn't do that. He's involved in the world only as a means to get a Torah mitzvahs. That comes through bittul. That's a bittul to do what the Eibishter wants. In other words, since his avodah is not about satiating his thirst, that there should be gilui Elokus, but he's just given over to the Ratzon Hashem. Therefore, it's not nogeya, the gilui, that he should know Elokus in the world, even though that's an unbelievable thing and that's the ultimate goal. But he just wants to keep Torah mitzvahs. He's given over to the Ratzon Hashem. That's what Hashem wants of him, and therefore even doing stuff in the world is to get to Torah mitzvahs. So that's that comes through bittul, and that's the similar thing that Korach didn't have. And therefore the Rebbe ends off with this idea of Hasom Nafshenu b'chaim l'aslam etraleinu. When a person does Torah mitzvahs is the idea of Rosh. When he's involved in inyanim of world, that's regel. Now, in order to make sure that his regel, in other words, his engagement in worldly things will not falter, will not fail, that comes from a high level of chayis, which is Hasom Nafshenu b'chaim. Chayis which comes from higher than teva, higher than the chayis of the neshama itself. Why? Because when it comes to the chayis of the neshama itself, it could be that a person should want Elokus in worldly things. And then when he does worldly engagement in order for the worldly stuff itself, he wants to see the gilu in the gashmis itself, not l'shem shamayim to do Torah mitzvahs, then his engagement with gashmis, the raglayim, will actually fail. In order for the raglayim not to fail, in other words, in order for his being involved in Inyani Rishus in Hashem Shamayim, this comes through Chaim, which is higher than Teva, which the bittul to that Chaim is only, the keli for that Chaim is only bittul. Because it's higher than Teva, higher than the nature of the person, even the Neshama, it combines both things, both opposite things together, that even though he knows the Ilui, the greatness of being Mavarer, Divrei Rishus, of seeing a lakus dafki in gashmis, but at the same time he knows that maila, but he only does the gashmis in order to do Torah mitzvahs, because then his gashmistic engagement will actually not fail, and that's a combination of two opposite midas, and that's tiferes, and that comes from bittul, and therefore that comes from a high level of chayis. The Remaim ends off in Ois Test. One can look it up yourself, and the Rebbe gives a whole beer over here, which is needs a bit of time to explain, but we won't do that now. The connection to this whole idea and Yud Beis, the Yontif of Yud Beis Tammuz. Have a good day, good Shabbos, and thanks for listening.